I didn't mean to watch it. Honestly, I was just scrolling through late-night streams, looking for something familiar, something comforting, one of those Saturday nights where the world feels quiet and small, where cartoons are the only thing that makes sense. And then I found it. Not a typical episode, not one anyone talks about anymore. It had been pulled midair, yanked from the streaming service like it had never existed, but somehow I stumbled onto it. They didn't just remove it. Something about it made them pull it midair. And I think they didn't want anyone to see it. I remember staring at the title, blinking at the flickering thumbnail, and feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. A sense of wrongness, subtle at first, like stepping into a room you know shouldn't exist. I laughed nervously, told myself it was just nostalgia getting the better of me. It's just a lost episode, I whispered to my empty room, but even as I said it, my stomach sank. I clicked play. The screen lit up my face in a way that was almost comforting, almost normal, and for a few minutes, everything seemed fine. The colors were bright, the characters familiar. The music played its usual cherry tune. And then I don't know how to describe it, the smile I felt twisting into unease. Something was off. A glance, a movement, a sound that didn't belong. I thought I was imagining it, telling myself I was overreacting. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of my laptop fan. But it wasn't my imagination. Not really. Because when it ended, or rather, when it disappeared mid-scene, my room didn't feel quiet anymore. My computer hummed differently, shadows shifted too sharply, and that tiny little voice at the edge of my mind whispered, "You weren't supposed to see that." I froze. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. I was already too far in, already holding a piece of something that no one else should have. I've always been the kind of person who chases the obscure. While everyone else streamed the newest episodes and stuck to whatever was trending, I hunted for the rare, the forgotten, the deleted. It wasn't even a conscious choice. It just felt like I had a sixth sense for the things that disappeared before anyone could notice. Late nights, empty chat rooms, sketchy forums, and private groups were my playground. I liked the thrill of finding something no one else could, of knowing secrets that existed in whispers and vanished links. The cartoon itself was, at first glance, completely ordinary. Bright colors, simple humor, a cast of characters so familiar you, de-swear you, de-grown up with them. People online remembered it fondly, well, some did, but rumors swirled about lost episodes, about content that was too strange or never meant to air. You could find hints in forums, tiny screenshots, cryptic posts that vanished overnight. Most of it was dismissed as conspiracy nonsense, but I always felt there was something to it. Something hidden in plain sight. That night, I wasn't expecting anything unusual. My routine was simple. Grab a snack, set up my laptop on the couch, make sure the lights were low, and let the background noise of cartoons lull me into mindless comfort. I scrolled past the usual titles, past the ones everyone had already streamed 100 times, until a broken link caught my eye. The thumbnail was corrupted, colors bleeding in ways they shouldn't, but the title was unmistakable, The Lost Episode. My heart skipped. It was one of those moments where curiosity claws at you, whispers in your ear that you shouldn't, that it's dangerous, but you can't resist. I hesitated. A part of me wanted to close the tab, to pretend I hadn't seen it, to stay in the safety of normalcy. But another part, the one that always sought out the hidden corners, the secrets, the forbidden knowledge, that part leaned forward and clicked play. And in that instant, everything familiar began to feel fragile, like the edges of my reality were fraying. The normal comfort of cartoons, the childhood nostalgia, it all started twisting into something unfamiliar, something slightly wrong. I found the episode wasn't simple. It wasn't on any legitimate streaming platform. And searching for it brought me to forums so obscure that most usernames were anonymous, and threads disappeared within hours. Links led to private folders, torrents, even dead sites that somehow still carried fragments of the file. I remember my fingers trembling as I copied a URL from a thread that claimed, "If you're seeing this, consider yourself warned." The warnings didn't scare me, they excited me. There's a thrill in touching the forbidden, and stepping across a line that most people wouldn't dare to approach. The file itself was small, unassuming. I double-clicked it, and the screen went black for a moment before the familiar cartoon logo appeared. At first, it felt normal. Nostalgic, even. I chuckled quietly, thinking about how easy it was to forget that cartoons were supposed to be simple. But then the animation started to falter. Colors bled in unnatural ways, lines stretched and warped. The cheerful theme music stuttered into something that sounded like a whisper, a breath from somewhere behind the screen. My skin prickled. I leaned closer, telling myself I was imagining it. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of my laptop fan. And then I saw it. One of the characters, a figure I had known for years, paused mid-motion and looked directly at me. Not in the usual cartoon way, exaggerated and playful, but with a weight, a presence that felt almost human. My heart skipped, but I told myself it was clever animation, some glitch maybe. But the voice, it wasn't theirs. It was low, almost too quiet to hear, yet I felt it more than I heard it. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. I wanted to stop the episode, to shut the laptop, but a compulsion held me there. Every frame seemed heavier, darker, and the humor that usually carried the show vanished. Dialogue twisted into nonsense, laughter sounded hollow, distorted. The other characters moved unnaturally, their smiles stretched too wide, eyes too bright, like they were masking something. I could feel a creeping dread building, not from what was on the screen, but from the way it seeped into my awareness, into the edges of my vision. I tried to reason with myself. It's just a cartoon. You're overreacting. But every instinct told me otherwise. Every fiber of my being screamed that this episode wasn't made for casual viewing. I remember glancing at the clock, thinking only a few minutes had passed, but the timestamp said otherwise. It had been hours and I hadn't blinked. My reflection in the black screen looked wrong. My eyes were whiter than usual, my skin pale under the glow of the laptop. And then the first subtle hallucination. A shadow moved across the room behind me, not in the corner, not on the wall, but across the floor, reflected faintly on the polished surface of the table. I spun around. Nothing. Only the familiar furniture, untouched, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlight outside. I sat back, trying to rationalize. Maybe it was exhaustion, maybe it was the darkness, maybe it was the episode. But deep down, I knew it wasn't imagination. It's hard to explain the way things began to change after that first viewing. At first, it was subtle. Little things I could dismiss. A flicker at the edge of my vision, a sound that didn't belong, like a laugh too quiet, or a whisper curling through the room just behind my ear. I told myself I was imagining it. Everyone tells themselves that in moments like this, don't they? That when fear seeps in, the mind exaggerates, twists ordinary shadows into monsters. But I knew this was different. I could feel it deep in my chest, an unease that wasn't just mental, it was physical. The episode replayed itself in my memory constantly, even when I wasn't thinking about it. The stuttering voices, the stretched expressions, the way one of the characters had looked directly at me, that gaze haunted the corners of my perception. I started noticing odd coincidences outside the screen. Objects in my room slightly shifted, small things misplaced, patterns forming in places where there should have been none. I'd sit down with a snack and swear the crumbs on the table spelled something, like a message, but when I looked closer, it would dissolve into normality. Yet the feeling remained that I was being watched. I tried to distract myself. I turned on music, scrolled through social media, anything to escape the mental loop the episode had created. But even there, I caught glimpses. A profile picture flickered too long, a video stuttered as if paused mid-frame, and my pulse spiked. I wasn't alone. It was impossible, and yet the sensation of presence was undeniable. I whispered to myself, half laughing, half panicked, "You're imagining it. You're just imagining it." But the words felt hollow. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the characters moving in ways they weren't supposed to. Smiles twisting into grotesque shapes, laughter warping into guttural whispers, shapes slithering behind familiar furniture in impossible angles. And the sound, that faint, indecipherable whispering, would creep through my ears, just enough to make me flinch awake. I started talking to myself more, asking the episode questions aloud, half hoping for answers, half hoping it would go away. No response came, only the oppressive certainty that it was there, just beyond perception. One night in the quiet of my room, I noticed my reflection in the laptop screen was wrong. My eyes looked too wide, my face too pale, my expression caught between fear and awe. It was me, but it wasn't me. And then the whispering came again, louder this time. You shouldn't be here. You weren't meant to see. I froze, my hands gripping the edge of the desk, heart hammering so loud I thought the neighbors must hear. By this point, I was convinced I hadn't just stumbled onto a lost episode. Something more sinister was at work. Something alive, something aware, something that had used this cartoon as a door, a way to reach out. Every night, it crept closer. Every shadow, every distorted noise, every strange flicker on my devices, proof. The episode wasn't over. It hadn't ended when the screen went black. It was inside me now, shaping the world in ways I could barely understand. I remember the exact moment it happened. 1 second the episode was playing, or at least I thought it was, and the next, the screen froze. Not the usual buffering or glitching, this was different. The colors distorted violently, stretching in impossible ways, turning familiar characters into grotesque shapes. The sound warped into static and whispers that I couldn't understand, yet somehow I felt the meaning. I could feel it. My hands were trembling, and my pulse was deafening in my ears. And then, just as suddenly, the image disappeared. The file was gone, vanished from my screen, from my laptop, as if it had never existed. But the room didn't return to normal. Shadows shifted in ways that defied logic, stretching unnaturally across the walls. My laptop fan hummed a strange, uneven rhythm, almost like it was breathing. I leaned closer, half expecting the episode to resume, to reappear. Nothing. Only silence. And then a soft tapping, coming from behind me, from the corner of the room that had always been empty. I spun around. Nothing. Just the familiar furniture, yet somehow wrong. The air felt heavier, the light too dim, the shadows too deep. I tried to rationalize. It's just a glitch, I told myself. Computers crash. Lost files happen. People misremember things. But deep down, I knew this was no ordinary error. It was as if the episode had been aware of me watching it, aware of my presence, and it had chosen to vanish in a way that left a mark, not just on the file, but on reality itself. I could feel it lingering in the corners of my perception, a pressure I couldn't escape. My devices began acting strangely. My phone buzzed with notifications that weren't there, messages half-formed and indecipherable. The glow of my screen cast shadows that moved independently, sliding across the walls and ceiling. At one point, I swore I saw the characters from the episode reflected in the black screen, standing silently behind me, their smiles too wide, their eyes too bright. I blinked and they were gone. And then came the whispers. Not from the laptop, not from the speakers, just there, in the space around me, curling into my ears and around my consciousness. You weren't supposed to see this. I felt the words inside my skull, like they had been waiting for me, like they had been planted there long before I even discovered the episode. I wanted to escape, to run, to shut everything down. But as I stood, the room itself seemed to resist. The door handle twisted in my hand as if it were anchored somewhere else. Shadows pooled in unnatural corners, following me. The episode was gone, yes, but it had left a residue, a mark that I couldn't erase. My reality had fractured, and I was standing inside the pieces. I couldn't leave it alone. The more the episode haunted me, the more I felt an irresistible pull to understand it, to trace its origins, to uncover the reasons it had been pulled midair. I started digging into the corners of the internet I had always avoided, forums where threads lasted hours, links that disappeared almost immediately, communities obsessed with lost media, haunted files, and cursed episodes. Every search led to fragments, whispers, and vanished posts, but slowly a picture began to form. The episode had never been meant for public release. Rumors pointed to the studio, an unfinished season, a set of episodes that had been locked away, hidden, or destroyed. One particular thread mentioned that this episode had been taken offline during its first broadcast, mid-transmission, and that no copy should exist anywhere. And yet here it was, alive on my screen. Someone or something had left it for me to find. The more I searched, the more unsettling the findings became. Screenshots existed, but they were corrupted, glitching in ways that distorted faces and scenes, sometimes embedding brief, almost subliminal messages that didn't belong in a cartoon. People spoke of files that watched back, that altered those who viewed them, leaving subtle marks in their behavior, perception, and even their surroundings. I wasn't alone in this. Others had reported seeing the same warped figures, hearing whispers, noticing strange coincidences, but their stories vanished as soon as they were told. I followed traces of the episode to abandoned websites, private repositories, and email threads that had been archived in secrecy. The pattern was unmistakable. The episode was part of something larger, a network of lost media designed to vanish, leaving only those who dared to watch it changed forever. And the more I uncovered, the more I realized the danger. This wasn't just a glitch or a mistake, it was intentional. Some unseen force wanted the episode hidden, wanted people like me to stumble onto it, experience it, and carry the consequences. One message in a private forum struck me particularly hard. It was cryptic, a single line: "They notice when you watch. They always notice. You cannot unsee. You cannot leave it behind." I stared at it for hours, the words carving into my mind like ice. The episode hadn't just existed, it had agency. And in some way, it had chosen me. I started to see connections everywhere. Clues from old threads, comments from vanished accounts, even shapes in the shadows of my room, all pointing to the same conclusion. The episode was a conduit, a doorway, a piece of forbidden knowledge. And now I was tangled in its web. By the time I finished the investigation, I knew that whatever I had unleashed wasn't limited to my screen. It was in the spaces between light and shadow, in the edges of perception, and in the way I could no longer trust the world around me. And deep down, I understood the cruel truth. Some things are never meant to be known, and some doors, once opened, cannot be closed. I realized it was no longer just about understanding the episode. It was about confronting what it had become. The air in my room felt thick, almost alive, and the boundaries between my reality and the episode had dissolved entirely. Shadows moved independently, stretching and twisting, and the whispers had grown into a chorus, murmuring unintelligible phrases, yet carrying an unmistakable weight. I could feel their attention, like hundreds of eyes pressing into the back of my skull. I sat at my desk, staring at the blank laptop screen, and tried to summon the episode again, almost against my better judgment. I whispered its name aloud, as if calling it forward would make it appear. And then slowly, the screen flickered. Shapes emerged, colors bending, a distorted reflection of the cartoon I had once known. The characters were no longer innocent. They were aware, patient, and waiting. One of them leaned forward, a grotesque smile stretched impossibly wide, and I felt it pierce through me. It spoke not with words I could fully comprehend, but with meaning that sank into me like ice. "You've seen. You cannot return. You cannot hide." I wanted to scream, to run, to tear everything down, but I felt trapped, held in place by something that had always been there, waiting. The episode wasn't confined to the laptop. It had infiltrated my mind, my space, my perception. Every attempt to escape was met with pressure, with subtle shifts in the environment, walls leaning, furniture warping, shadows clinging. And then I understood the cruel truth. The episode had never been meant to entertain. It was a test, a seed, a conduit for something beyond comprehension. Its removal midair was never about mistakes or censorship, it was containment. It had escaped, and I had been the first to witness it fully, to experience its reach, to carry its influence into the real world. As I sat there, trembling, I realized it was watching me even as I watched it. Every glance, every thought, every heartbeat, it responded, adapted, knew. I was no longer merely an observer. I was a participant, an extension of its existence. The whispers had names now, some I recognized, others alien, and they circled me like vultures, reminding me that there was no undoing what had begun. And yet a part of me, the obsessive, curious part that had clicked that play button in the first place, wanted to reach further. I wanted to understand more, to see where it came from, what it was, what it could do. I knew I shouldn't. I knew it was dangerous. But the pull was irresistible. If you're listening and you've stumbled across something similar,